Okay, we're on Eruvin Perik Yud, Mishnah, Yud Gimel, 13th Mishnah, and the 10th chapter of Eruvin. We continue to talk about things that you could do in the Beit Hamikdash because of Din Rabbanan, but not in the Medina. And then we're talking about the issues of health. Says the Mishnah, Machzirin Retying b'Hamikdash, aval lo b'Medina. You can return, you can take, if a Kohen had a blemish or a wound on his hand, he could put it back. The Retying is the bandage in the Mikdash, aval lo b'Medina, but you can't do it in the Medina. Okay? Im batchila, and if he didn't have a bandage, he wants to put it on, kan v'kan asar. You can't do it in either place. We've talked about in Hilchot Shabbat that there's a problem of doing anything mishum refuah. Chazal made a gzeira of doing anything mishum refuah. Okay, why? Because it's a problem of toche. Here we're talking about a different issue. The issue is the Retying. The bandage that they would use is literally, let me see if I can find it here. The Retying. It's difficult to really give an accurate description of the bandages that they use because they would tie something around it. But the bandage that would use is literally, what they would use is something called a plaster. Now, if anybody who's Israeli knows, when you say plaster, if you look up the word plaster, if you look up plaster in Hebrew, the word plaster refers to a Band-Aid. Plaster in Hebrew is a Band-Aid. But in ancient times, their Band-Aids were literally made of plaster. I did a little bit of research, and it seems that they would put medicine into the plaster, and then they would, if you had a problem in your hand, and then they would smear it on, and so it would stick, and it would cover the entire area, kind of like the way we do with certain creams, and then they would tie it around it. So the plaster itself, it wasn't just covering, it was for healing. So the Mishnah says, if a Kohen had a Retying on, and now he has to take it off, the Bartanura says, okay, Kohen shetzurach la'avod ba'avodah b'Shabbat. He has to do his avodah in the Mikdash. V'natal Retying sh'hayta al gabei amaka. He took off the plaster. Okay, shidosh kadei shelo yehei chotzetzet ben chatzero ben besaro la'avodah. It wouldn't be a chotzetz. It wouldn't be something that would be chotzetz. Would be interrupting. Would what's the word? I can't remember. Chotzetz would interrupt, stop, would break the connection between besaro la'avodah, between his flesh and the avodah. Machzira gabei makato la'achar ha'avodah. He can return it. He can put the Retying back. The interesting halachic principle. If you didn't let him put it back on, mimna v'lo avid avodah. He would stop. He would be mimna. He would refrain and not do the avodah. He says, "I got this bandage. I'm not going to do the avodah today." So therefore, we allow him to take it off, do the avodah, and put it back on in order so that he would do the avodah. But you can't do it in the Medina. Gzeira shema yimrach haretying. We're afraid you're going to do the mimrach. You're going to shmir new. V'chayav mishum mimachek. And that's a chiyuv in isur of mimachik, of shmearing. There's an isur of shmearing, because the Retying, I guess, their plaster was sort of soft. It was pliable. So they would push it down, they would press it down, kind of like, I guess, a wax of some kind. Okay? And im batchila, and if he never had a wound, he never had a bandage on at all, kan v'kan hasar. Even in the Beit Hamikdash, you can't put it on. Why? Because then you're not doing it for the purpose of the avodah, and you can wait till after Shabbat and not do it. Okay? Why? And the Bartanura says, the Bartanura says that the Gemara says it's only Hachzarat Retying if you put it on the ground. The Gemara, you have to look in the Gemara, but if he's holding it or he put it down not on the ground, then you could always put it back. The Mishnah continues. Koshrin nima b'Hamikdash. A nima is basically a string of an instrument. You can tie the nima in the Beit Hamikdash, avalo b'Medina. Remember the Beit Hamikdash, the Leviyim, let's look at our pictures. Here we are. They use a violin, but it's not a violin. It was a 7-stringed instrument. It was a harp of some kind. The Kohanim in the Beit Hamikdash, they played their instruments. So therefore, if, let's say, a string broke, the Mishnah says you can tie it. Okay, let's look at the Mishnah. Koshrin nima, nimat kino shel Leviyim. It's the nima of the harp of the Leviyim that broke on Shabbat. Why? Because the Tanna Kama holds machshirei mitzvah shelo yachol la'asotam me'etzmo. It's a machshir mitzvah. They need it in order to sing, in order to make the music in the Beit Hamikdash. You couldn't do it yesterday. Ha'ayom nifsika. It broke today. Therefore, dochinat Shabbat. Therefore, it's dochesh Shabbat, and you can tie it. Let's go back to the Mishnah. Okay? But not in the Medina. Clearly, it's not a mitzvah in the Medina. There's no mitzvah to play music, and we don't do that. It's asur mishum shvut to play music on an instrument. Im batchila, but if the string was broken before Shabbat, kan v'kan asur, because you should have done it in the Beit Hamikdash, so it's asur both in the Mikdash and in the Medina. Final halacha. Chotchin yabelet b'Hamikdash. A yabelet is a wart. Yes, thank you for that. It's a wart, and a kohen who has a wart cannot do the avodah because it's a hefsek. It's called a mum. It's a mum. It's a blemish vis-a-vis the avodah in the Beit Hamikdash. But you want to cut it off. So how would you cut it off? We'll see in a second. You can cut it in the Mikdash, avalo b'medina. Not in the Medina, not in the, I guess it would be talking about dry skin because it wouldn't bleed, otherwise you're problem chovel. V'im b'kli, and if you do it with a vessel, with a utensil, i.e. with a knife, kan v'kan asur. So how are you allowed to be chotech? How are you allowed to do it? 1 second. Chotchim ota b'mikdash bayad, with your hand. I guess you'd use your thumb. You could do it. You could take it off. Ein b'zel mishum shvut. That's a didurabanan. And it's kila achar yad. But not with the kli, de malacha gmurahu. That's a malacha to cut off your belt, cut off your wart with the kli. And therefore, it's a toldav gozezet atzemer. It's a toldav shearing. You're not allowed to cut off warts with a kli. You're not allowed to cut off warts or blisters, anything like that, on Shabbat in the Medina, even with your hands. Okay, in the Medina, you're not allowed to do that. Now, if you have a question about ritiyah, putting on plasterim, how come we all put on band-aids on Shabbat? So I looked in the Pninei Halacha. Melamed writes, he says, you're allowed to put on a band-aid. We all do this, okay? It's kedei lehagen, to protect. Shelo yechtach babeged or b'chafatzim acherim. Heter zeh gam kasher medubar b'michush bilvad. You're allowed to do this even if it's only a mechush. Mechush means it's not dangerous. Yeah, like you get a cut. It's not dangerous. Why are you allowed to do that? Isn't it refuah? Ho'il ve'aplaster eino merapeh. It doesn't heal. Ela rak magen. It only protects. Which raises an interesting question, because many people, when they get a cut, they'll put a spray, an antibacterial spray. That's refuah. So one should ask a she'elat chacham, a she'elat rav, are you allowed to use a bacterial spray? You're definitely allowed to put on the Band-Aid, because that's only protective. It's preventative. But the bacterial spray, that might be refuah on Shabbat, that requires an investigation. Can you wait until after Shabbat? We'll stop here. If you have any comments or questions, as always, email me at ourspotter@gmail.com, and we'll dedicate our learning to the memory of my father, Rav Simcha ben Yitzchak Kalman. Have a great day.